All right. Hello and welcome to a Randall Carlson podcast. This is Cosmographia, episode 111.
Oh,
And we're
yes.
gonna we're gonna talk about the plasma tech, get some updates. We've got Jahannah James over in London, and Jordan from Alchemical Science is over in the Czech Republic, gonna give us the latest on what they've been doing and what's up with the tech with the Cosmic Summit, where Randall Carlson also spoke. So just gonna let these people roll and see what the latest greatest is, and see if we can update the uh, plasma tech and where the inventions of Malcolm Bendel are going to be going in the near future, and hopefully transforming this world we're in. Welcome, you two. Let you introduce yourselves a little bit if you want. Just tell us what you've been up to. But Randall can start us off with a thought too if you want, Randall.
Well, I'm Randall, and yeah, I've gotten to know Jahannah and Jordan at the, I guess, Cosmic Summits where we met. I,
Mhm.
yeah, and that was a lot of fun for the most part, although maybe a little bit of, we won't get into that, all that, but anyways, yeah, it was good for my end because I was, something like that where you're presenting a cross section of ideas and some of them are outside the mainstream. Yeah, there's going to be some controversy, and so that is to be expected. But I have been woefully neglectful of the latest developments and where it's at. So I'm very excited to hear about that. I've been focusing on, the geological work primarily for the last 6 months to a year. So I haven't had time to keep up with what's going on, nor invest the time that I want to get the background, the scientific and technical background to fully understand what's going on. And would I be would I be correct to say that the consensus that might be emerging is not so much about does it work, but how does it work?
Yep, that would be right. That's kind of where
Okay.
the contention is, and yeah,
Uh-huh.
what we're all pushing for at the moment. Um, Obviously, Malcolm's got his understanding, which is also my understanding. Makes a lot of sense to me, and is supported by a lot of previous research. But yeah, there was some contention about, is this just and better, cheaper catalytic converter and all this kind of stuff. But there hasn't really been any explanation on that counter argument
Okay.
as to why that would be and how it's working otherwise. So for the moment, it seems to be solidly accepted that, yeah, number one, it is working, and number two, that there is some transmutation going on, and this is caused by plasmoids or ball lightning or any of the other million names that people have given it
Mm-hmm.
over the decades.
So you are now in the Czech Republic, Jordan.
That's right. I'm currently in the lovely offices of Mr. Bob Greenyer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, who I'm here helping with some archival work of Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto, sorry. Never good at pronouncing these names, but yeah, so I'm here in the Czech Republic, been here for about a month and going to be here a little bit longer. Lovely place.
Now let's see, is Prague in the Czech Republic?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
Yeah. And recently I discovered, Prague is in Bohemia. Like that's what this
yeah.
region used to be called. And so this is, yeah, the
Oh,
beginning of that, us Bohemians.
vampires?
What's that, sorry?
Are there any vampires in
I
Prague?
haven't met any, but we did go to an alchemical conference run by Roger Green from Breakthrough Energy, and there was we went underground in a bunch of places, and there's like so many alchemist labs down there with all of their gear intact, and it's a really magical city ruled by Venus.
Mm.
A lot of ley lines connecting in one area. It's a very, very special place that I did not really know about before this.
What else can you tell us about that? What does ruled by Venus entail?
Well, so we went on a tour, and this was run by a local witch, Ava, and she was, yeah, showed us about the place, and I think she just left it at that it was ruled by Venus. But apparently Prague used to be known as like the feminine heart of Europe. And you can really see
Okay.
that in the sense of even the shape of it and the surroundings and how beautiful it is. And it really inspired a kind of renaissance in science and in art. And, there's so much that I did not know about this place. Like the scanning electron microscope was invented here in Brno, where I am, as well. And so they've got some of the best engineering facilities. Like a ton of stuff was invented here, but also some of the most active alchemists were all meeting in Prague. Most of this conference was held at John Dee and Edward Kelly's tower.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and it was amazing. I've got a lot to share from that trip on my channel at some point. And yeah, we saw a lot of stuff, but it was actually a real renaissance of science and magic and art. All happened in Prague, hence the Bohemia, the Bohemians.
So it sounds like it's still kind of a hotbed of alchemy.
Yeah, yeah, it is seemingly. I mean, look, a lot of it's historical, but you could set up the most amazing lab here because you can just find all of the glassware, all of the old apparatuses, and yeah, and I think there's probably going to be another renaissance here. Like everyone was kind of talking about it afterwards, of like maybe we should all come to the Czech Republic and start it again.
Now,
Yeah,
well,
I'm in London, and although there's labs in London which have Malcolm's machines, but I haven't gone down in a while. So Jordan, you are the best person to update exactly what's happening because you're literally in the lab right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, so I came to London as well, and that's where the best kind of prototype units have been done. That's with Landlogical, who, they've been behind this for a long time and playing a big part in yeah, pushing forward with the commercialization of the tech. So I went over there and we did the whole closed room test. So we shut all the doors, we ran the control engine and near choked ourselves to death for a minute, which I know is incredibly dangerous. No one needs to tell me that. We didn't run it for long. We didn't need long to find out. And then, yeah, run the new units and they just ran smoothly, perfectly. No fiddling with the choke or anything that people may have seen in other tests. It was just on. We ran it for as long as we wanted. I was right down there on the exhaust, huffing it as usual with a 4-gas sensor. And yeah, they've really sorted out the engineering there. And yeah, it was really great to see it for myself. And I've got some of that footage. We'll see if we can release that at some point because, they are a commercial entity and I was just there as a guest. So it's not, I've got to ask permission for that. But
what
yeah.
happened to the test that was going on? We saw the pictures of the construction project that they put into the London power grid that was kind of secretive, but then it was talked about quite a bit. Was that just a short term? Was that
I didn't
what
actually
happened to
go
that?
and I didn't go and see that. Jahannah, can you comment?
Yeah, so it's on the other side of London. There's 2 sites. One of them is the lab that has lots of all of the like regular sized engines, and then there's the one that I call it Big Dragon, just because it's massive and scary, and it is like a huge thunderstorm generator, and Landlogical have been using it, I think, since last March. It's been a couple of months that they've been running it, and yeah, I don't know how much what I've been told I can say like publicly, but
Well, that seems that would be a really important thing to give reports on. If it's been running for months, then hey, this thing
yeah,
has some longevity. It's holding
I mean,
up, or
there's photos of it online. Like George Howard has them on his Instagram. Like it's not super secretive, but there is a big version, and then there's like regular car size versions. And
yeah, I did a whole video on the big one, so you can talk about that.
so the big version,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, I remember some of the guys at Landlogical were saying that in London there's been some like legal restrictions on how much emissions you can put into the air. There's a big campaign and lots of new laws and restrictions happening in England, and essentially they were saying that they were, without the machine, their profits would kind of wouldn't meet a profit margin because they've been restricted so much with the new emission laws. But they said with the machine, they can not only like meet the profit margin, but they can actually get a profit because they well under the emission. They meet all the emission like laws, because they can reduce the carbon emissions right down. So from their perspective, from hitting all their KPIs and targets, they were like, yeah, I mean, it works. We're legally passing everything we need to pass.
This is land logic you're talking about?
And logical,
Yeah.
yeah.
Land
So
logic.
they are a it's a gas extraction, right?
Yeah, I think they do a few things, but yeah, they've been at the spearhead of kind of pushing this out there and engineering it properly and developing it, and they were the ones who did the certified tests in the UK, yeah, recently as well. So,
but also, just to be clear as well, like they've got Land Logical, who are where the labs are, but then it's also been independently tested by independent emissions testing.
yeah, I should have said they paid for the tests, but yeah, it was a large global organization that's certified by multiple governments to kind of do that testing that came in and did that.
And
Yeah,
the fun story is that the guy who came in for the emissions testing looked at the Thunderstorm Generator and was a bit well, more than a bit skeptical, and was like, I'm wasting my time. What am I doing here? And it passed emissions testing again by this government backed, like, so it's got the official whatever you need to do to pass the official test. It has. So I guess backed by the UK government, we can say that it works. Yeah, it's just exactly what you said, Randall. How does it work? It's still not exactly clear.
Well, I'm interested. I've been fairly circumspect about my whole pronouncements because initially, the Joe Rogan, shooting my mouth off on Joe Rogan, when I thought that's what Malcolm wanted me to do. So I thought, oh, full disclosure. I interpreted that in my mind one way, and I guess, so anyways, I said too much, and so there was an interesting barrage of response to that I was really pretty much unprepared for. But I weathered the storm, but I'm still being circumspect to the extent that, well, people still make comments online, who don't know diddly squat about what they're talking about. But, and I basically don't pay any attention to them for the most part because I've got just distracts my focus. But on the other hand, it would be good to know and be able to confirm what what you just said, Jahannah. So that's great news because obviously I'd love to see it work, and I'd love to see it become a thing out there in our economy. I really would like to see that. So, and to me, the thing that really is kind of drives home the critical timing of this whole thing is just right now, there's a lot of conflict in the world, as we are all well aware of, and we're hovering close to really dangerous times that I thought were behind us, going back to the early 60s when the confrontation was at its peak and the Cuban Missile Crisis and all of that. But all of this conflict is ultimately born out of the effort to control resources. And I think that's where the connection comes in, where this is something that could change the rules of the game in a very powerful and profound way. And I kind of figure civilization is at a crossroads right now. And we need everything we can on our side to make sure that it moves forward in harmonious ways, in life-affirming ways, and so on, and not the other direction, which is
peaceful,
kind of where it's peaceful. Yes. The other direction that we're also being pressured to move in is perpetual warfare. And that's born out of a Malthusian mindset that there's only so much, and it's going to come down to this grim competition in the end for who controls resources. Ultimately, why are we in Ukraine? Resources. 1.1 trillion cubic meters of natural gas sitting under Donetsk and Donbass, which is exactly the area of contention. And it could go on: manganese, titanium, coal, uranium, all of this under Ukraine. This is what this is all about. And I think the Thunderstorm, the plasma technology, whatever form it takes, once it becomes mature and out there in society and becomes a tool of our civilization. I mean, I really think that it could powerfully deflect us away from that view and the mindset that kind of perpetuates that view.
Yeah, I've got absolutely no doubt. And I think that's the key, is it's the mindset. You know, the Thunderstorm Generator is a transition technology, and that's why we get all these, even like when I first saw you announce it on Joe Rogan, because that was my first exposure to Malcolm's work. And so thank you. I'm glad that happened. But it's a transition, and it's a clean transition, because we don't want to cause more war. Like, frankly, I've met a number of people who have over Unity systems at this point. Often they do have some negative effect, like back EMF or strange radiation or something that can, you know, essentially cause another problem, as well as bringing it. As far as we can see, that's not the case with what Malcolm's technology does, and that's a lot to do with the numbers and this whole music of the spheres theory, which you've propagated yourself, Randall. And as Malcolm said, you know, his work is built on yours, among many others, for that reason, because it is about harnessing what nature is already doing. And this is what Marco Rodin, the vortex-based mathematician, talks about as well. You know, that if we can actually get the geometry right, if we can follow the path that nature wants us to follow, then all the energy gets harnessed in the right way. You know, we're not going to have some kind of negative alternative, but it really is at this stage, you know, if we can break this control narrative, if we can show that this is a lie, this carbon control bullshit, at least in the West. Like, there are cities we do need to clean up around the world.
Absolutely.
India recently, and yeah, like
absolutely.
carbon monoxide's damaging people. That's bad.
Yes.
But for most of us, we all know we need more carbon. Mainly, we probably need it in the soil, but we even need it in the atmosphere to some extent. So it's not necessarily about that, but it is about breaking that narrative and moving us forward and forcing the world in a direction where we can use all of the abundance around us, because we have so many sources of fuel. You know, like Bob talks about methane hydrate coming from the tundra, and we've got millions and millions of tons of this, you know, going up into the air. Just got to harness it. We have that many fuels we can still use, and everybody has a combustion engine of some sort. You know, when you talk about millions of tuk-tuks in India and all these small vehicles that people have, it's not necessarily going to be that easy to transition to anything like electric or even solar or any of this stuff. You know, there's always some damage with that. And so why not use this as a transition? But the great thing about it is that it's teaching these principles, just simply the science of the thunderstorm. You know, two opposing vortexes creates a plane of equilibrium at the center, the eye of the storm, that 0 point. And, you know, that's not like we're pulling energy from the 0 point either. We're actually, it's just about the geometry. It's like, you know, the 0 point, or, you know, the ether, it's all around us. It's just in motion. It's in some kind of form, right? And so all we've got to do is create those geometric structures, hence the Vajra, you know, this little fellow that we've all talked about quite a lot, which is the shape of the Thunderstorm Generator as well. If we can create this structure to guide those vortexes and create that effect, then we've got a way to harness that energy in a way that we want. And so it's the science behind it and the brilliance of what Malcolm's done here, because it's out into the world now. The brilliance of what you've done as well, Randall, is getting this out to millions of people, these base principles, in something that looks reasonably innocuous, you know, something that's just a retrofit for a combustion engine that gets rid of the carbon. But we can break the carbon control narrative. We can show people how energy is harnessed in a certain way, which can be applied to many other technologies, including the turbine, which I helped Malcolm open source, and he put in some patents for. But it's the beginning of a new industrial revolution. This can be used in so many different ways. We can use it in agriculture. We can use it. I've been talking about this with Bob today, actually. You know, that we can power plants with plasma. You know, essentially. You know, it's about harvesting that chi, or that, you know, the prana, this energy and everything. It's just direct life force. You know, that's why you harness a vegetable, you eat it straight away. You're going to be much healthier than something that's been sitting on a shelf or irradiated or whatever. You know, simple principles. But agriculture, breaking the carbon control narrative and also cleaning up cities that need to be cleaned up, because cities are somewhat damaging entities to some extent, and then also increasing engine efficiency, making things cheaper, making us the ability to use more fuels, and then also cleaning up waste. And it's these base principles. This is exactly what Nikola Tesla was talking about, and what we could have had 120 years ago if that, excuse me, wasn't suppressed, and this science wasn't pushed down, clouded, and then we just got years of bullshit since then. Particle theory, quantum theory, even. This is all rubbish. I know people are going to hate me for saying it, but it is. It's crap. That is not what Tesla was talking about. This is not what any of these great scientists, the principles they were working on. They were looking at form and function of nature. That's the thunderstorm. That's two opposing vortexes. That happens on every scale of our universe. You know, when Malcolm says everything's a plasmoid, it's because we are. When people talk about our bioplasmic field, which we can verify, we can see, it shows we are a plasma structure, you know, that is essentially condensed matter into a certain way. And so it's, if we understand those base principles, we can use them for whatever we want. It can be a new industrial revolution and a renaissance in science, art, humanity. That's all.
Well, I'm going to
That's a
take
lot.
a couple of minutes here to digest what you just said. So could we have a couple of minutes of silence while I digest?
Process that. I had a question, Jordan. Because at Cosmic Summit, it was one of the first times that like the public could come and experience what anyone who's been honored enough to experience in the lab, which is where you can do the test where you test the normal engine that's not been touched, and you can nearly kill yourself on the fumes of it, and then you switch on the engine with the generator attached, and within 20 seconds the air starts to become breathable, so much so that you can actually go up to it and breathe in the exhaust. And at one time Bob put a carbon monoxide like alarm on me, and we were testing the normal engine outside, and within 10 seconds the alarm went off to be like, get away, you're going to die, this too much, like deathly levels of carbon monoxide. And then we went inside to test did the inside test, and I could go right up, and I've got video footage of me wearing the exact same alarm, and I was all the way around the machine, the engine was running and nothing. And it's quite a magical experience to have, because you can trust your nose. Like you can't, I don't know how you would be able to remove like deathly gases from your nose. Your nose is there for a reason. It's part of your like safety protocol. So at Cosmic, we could experience that with the guys that came down, and there was about 200 people in the car park watching the test. But something went wrong with the setup, and the bubbler wasn't working on the day, but we were still able to achieve like quite good results from running the Thunderstorm on a real, retrofitted to a real car, not just an engine. Have you been able to work out since then why it still worked without the bubbler? Maybe the bubbler isn't.
Yeah. I mean, this is actually something we knew for ages beforehand. It's actually, and I can prove it, like it was mentioned in one of my earlier videos, probably in like November, December last year, that essentially to put it simply, the Vajra, you know, the Thunderstorm Generator part, the metal part of it, can be infused with plasmoids. So that means that they nest themselves in this cubic iron structure, and they can continue to do work. So they're continuing the transmutation process even after the bubbler's been attached. And so for people who don't know, there's three parts to the Thunderstorm Generator. There's what we call the ionizer, which there's some debate over whether that should be called an ionizer, because it doesn't necessarily ionize. And I think that's maybe a word that Malcolm used because he doesn't think in these terms, frankly. Like he thinks in geometry and resonance. So to put it simply, that preconditions the air that's being pulled into the intake. And this is all using, you know, the strokes of the engine's piston to cause this vacuum. Then we've got the bubbler, which is where essentially water bubble cavitation is occurring. So bubbles are coming up, they're being collapsed, they're forming these homeostatic field structures. Go on, Randall.
Quick, so it's the upstroke of the engine that creates the vacuum that draws in the air, correct? Am I right on that?
Yeah, as far as I am aware.
The downstroke then creates a pressure that causes the collapse of the bubbles.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I mean, I'm not an expert on engines. I don't even necessarily know whether it causes pressure, but it certainly causes the cease of the vacuum, and so you're getting that collapse in the bubbler. I think there would be some
Simply because
because of the system itself, there. So I dare say that pressure is occurring. Yeah, but that's essentially what's happening is the bubbles are being pulled up on the vacuum cycle. They're being popped, but they're being popped in such a way that they're forming these little, we all know it, the infinity sign, but this is a toroid in 3D. And yeah, this is the special structure that we're talking about. This is the shape of the human field of, the shape of a field of anything, any living entity and things that we don't even consider as living entities. If you look at the work of Ken Wheeler, his Theoria Apophasis on YouTube, and he shows under the ferrocell, and I think that was invented by a guy, Tim Vercelli, maybe. I'm sorry if I got his name wrong, but the ferrocell. And you can see essentially the structure of the magnetic field. And it doesn't matter, we have to do this on magnets because they're such a strong magnetic field that they will affect the ion in such a way we can see it. But we see this toroidal form. And, same with Kirlian photography and all of these different ways that we've been able to view fields is this is a field. We could call a plasmoid a self-contained toroidal magnetic field, but what's a field? It's structured plasma, ultimately. And so that's what we're creating in there, and that's what we're calling the plasmoids, also called, the ball lightning. Wilhelm Reich called them orgone. They've been called so many different things. Bob calls them static electricity. I like I quite like plasmoids, it's like quite a personal term, and they're plasma and they're little entities, like bees. So, yeah, that's how that's going on.
There's the bubbler.
Yeah.
The ionizer that might not ionize, the bubbler, and then the actual turbo stubby stainless steel.
And so that's what gets imbued. Essentially, like anything that's metal, in particular, it's important that it contains iron. So they're made of 304 stainless steel, generally. And of course, there's steel in the engine as well, which we'll get to in a second. But if you run the bubbler for some period, I think it's maybe like a few hours, but it can be even less than that, depending on the efficiency of the device, then the Vajra itself, the Thunderstorm Generator, the metal part will get imbued. It will get embedded with plasmoids. So these little plasma electrical kind of structures, they embed themselves in the iron. This is why the annealing and this whole process goes on to try and de-stress the metal in the Thunderstorm Generator part is essentially to get all of these atomic cubes of the iron to be facing into the center. And this is, again, plasmoids just love geometry. This is all a geometrical science. It's all about giving them a home that they want to live in. And if you give them the right home, they'll just keep living there, and we'll still see the structures do work. So like Malcolm's even said that you've got to do all of your controls on your engine, on a clean engine. And that's why a clean engine got brought to Cosmic Summit. People were saying, why didn't you bring one? You've used it. Because you can't perform a clean test without having a fresh virgin, and because otherwise the engine itself, the metal in there, gets imbued with plasmoids, and it'll actually start to produce the effect, like nowhere near as well as having the device attached, but you'll still get a dramatic reduction in carbon gases just from running the unit with the engine for some period, and that doesn't last indefinitely. So where you could see this side of it going is that we may not need to actually have the bubbler and the ionizer in in a car, for example, but you may have something that's akin to a charging station where you can essentially just re-embed the Thunderstorm Generator itself with plasmoids and then just keep running the device with just a much smaller setup in there. And so, yeah, this was found out a long time ago. I think Malcolm's known about it for years, but I certainly mentioned it in a video probably, close to a year ago now. And so when it came up at Cosmic Summit, we had some people being like, oh, they just made that up on the spot. Well, we didn't. It does do that. It's been spoken about. And that's how it works.
Well, that was certainly one of my questions there. If you want to share something a minute, Randall, is it being miniaturized, for better use in a car? Are they coming up with better materials or different space age materials, whatever it's got to be to shrunk down to replace your catalytic converter or whatever. But yeah, if there's some sort of station where you can just get kind of recharged with the plasmoid, that makes sense. But is that in process? Is somebody working on that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's going through prototyping with yeah, several commercial entities at the moment for, pre-production for mass manufacture. And
Excellent.
of course, we've all seen the stubby design. So it went
Getting
from this
smaller and
24-inch
smaller.
pipe, yeah, down to
Right.
like a 3-inch. And so now it's actually a
Oh,
pretty
okay.
compact little unit that could fit into pretty much anything.
Okay. I haven't seen the mini model yet. Excellent.
Yeah, that was one of the ones we had at Cosmic Summit, at least. I think we had both
Yeah.
models there. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, can I share a screen here so
Yeah.
Of course.
you can see the schematic? You've seen this before. You've probably both seen this, but for people who are watching, what Jordan is describing here. So the
Yeah.
things that you were talking about, you mentioned the ionization chamber and, pointed out that that's maybe not the most accurate term to use for it, but nonetheless, what happens is the air is brought in here. And then what happens? It's subjected to an ultraviolet light. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And that's of a certain frequency. I can't quite remember what it is, so I won't say it, but it's in my build guide videos anyway. And that's just, yeah, essentially, to put it simply again, it's changing the frequency of the air. It's preconditioning it in a way that is going to be more conducive to the next step of the phase going through the bubbler.
Which is the plasmoid. What's here is being called a plasmoid generator. This is the bubble that you're referring to. And so the air is drawn in up through the bottom. There's a diffuser, which is typically just the diffuser you would put in the bottom of an aquarium to create bubbles, right?
Yep.
So the air is drawn up through there, and then it forms, well, I presume billions of bubbles, but they're microscopic. Being microscopic is key, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Like I think what's the ideal is like very, very small, like 1 micron or less than this. And look, Bob says, that ideally you're just creating a very wide kind of spectrum of bubbles, and then you're much more likely to hit the ones that are going to be able to perform viable cavitation. And so that's stuff with steel wool as well, just as, literally stainless steel scrubbers and other things have been tried, but these things just work really well. They seem to produce the effect that's needed. So yeah, you're trying to get these very microscopic bubbles. Malcolm says you want them to symmetrically collapse, and that's where you're going to get this gravity well, this,
because the larger bubbles won't collapse symmetrically.
Yeah, they'll just kind of
so they have to be very, very tiny, microscopic. You're right. I get that's interesting. So then it comes up in this chamber in here. That's where the steel wool is. And can you kind of explain a little further what the role of the steel wool is?
Yeah, so much the same role as the our air stone down the bottom is you just want to break up these bubbles and like I say, get a really wide spectrum of sizes there, and also break them up very, very small, because obviously we do want very, very small. We don't want big billowing bubbles coming out. So it's just, it's as simple as that. You just want to break it up, create a shear, create lots of very, very small bubbles that will be in the viable parameters for water bubble cavitation, which is how we form these little structures.
So it's like a sieve or a little net that this water's being forced through, and then that breaks it up into much smaller bubbles. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, just trying to create lots and lots of very, very small bubbles.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so both the air stone and the steel wool that's stuffed in there are for that purpose.
So Brad, hundreds of small bubbles.
Times
even
100,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful to
Oh,
watch.
you just said
I love
billion.
the bubble. It's so fun to watch, especially on the big one in London. The bubble, it's like the bubble is and it's amazing to watch.
Yeah, they're massive, those giant bubblers. It's fun to slow this stuff down.
Yeah, you film it and then put it in slow-mo. So
yeah.
So good. So cool.
Yeah, you can really see what's going on in there. It's very tumultuous. It's all just like a massive bubbling brew.
Foamy. Yeah,
Yeah.
Brew. We'll go with that. Yeah.
I was making a very oblique reference to Gary Larson, The Far Side. You guys probably aren't, that might be a cultural thing.
It was in
Yeah.
the papers when I was like a really young kid, but I didn't pay attention.
Oh, well, you see, that's
What about
probably
the
to your
stars?
regret, but there's one of my favorites cartoons is a couple of these kind of doofy looking characters standing on a hill. It's night. They're looking up at the sky, and one of them, the caption line is one of them is saying, "Look at all those stars. There must be hundreds of them." So,
Yeah.
but my anyhow, so back to the diagram. So now how, okay, so then are the plasmoids now you're now what's coming out of the top of the bubbler is this is now the plasmoids.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's right. You'll get, you know, the plasmoids in a stream of water vapor and hydrogen and all the stuff that's being
Okay,
split up in there. But
so that's
yeah,
the
that's what we call the
conveyance. They're-
cold stream.
okay, so
Yeah,
they're sort of piggybacking then on the other
that's it. Yeah, yeah, they're there, and they're coming in with the water vapors, water gases,
that are being
these
pulled
broken
off.
up elements.
In
And
in real
that
life,
is-
it's copper tube, isn't it? So you've got copper tubes going between
Yeah.
the generator to the
Let's see, I might,
thunderstorm.
Yeah, and then that's an old model shown here, obviously. So
right,
there's another sphere on the bottom
right.
of every kind of recent prototype. The first one I saw was actually like that, the one in Melbourne, and it still performed the effect. You know, like I think we got a vacuum leak after, I don't know, like 20 minutes or something, but it went long enough for me to be able to see exactly what was happening. But it's been improved a lot by having the two spheres, and this is,
Yeah.
of course, again the form we see in this little Vajra that Indra and Zeus and all the
Yeah.
others were holding, the lightning bolt weapon that saved the Earth.
Yeah, we'll pull that up. I've got some great images of that. So I'll get those ready after we take a break. So what you just pointed out now is, for those listening, is that the more advanced model has a second sphere.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's second sphere. There's two spheres connected by a tube or a cylinder. And what's interesting to me here is the ratios of the cylinders and spheres. You want to address that for a second?
Yeah. So, I mean, you'll all know the number 4-3-2. This is the ratio of the three spheres, because this isn't just one sphere on each side. There's actually 6 spheres total, you know, so
Yeah.
3 on each side, and you've got, you know, you can use the ratio, but we've literally used it in inches, you know, so you've got the 4-inch outer sphere, the 3-inch middle sphere, and then the 2-inch center sphere, which is just a flow guide. There's nothing actually in that. And so then you've got the cold stream going in that center 3-inch sphere, and you've got the hot exhaust waste stream coming from the other direction going into that outer 4-inch or 4 ratio sphere on the outside. So the streams actually never touch. They're just passing each other, because this is an electromagnetic phenomena rather than something that's physical or chemical. Although those things are involved.
So here, I just go ahead and show this since it's right here, but this is what produces the bubbles, this oxygen diffuser stone. And here's showing it in operation in an aquarium, a fish tank.
That's the one.
So the bubbles are brought up, they're produced. You have this alternating vacuum and compression stroke from the engine itself. So if what I'm recalling, it's the vacuum stroke that pulls the bubbles up into the bubbler, and the compression stroke then that causes the collapse of the microscopic bubbles. Now we have water vapor, we have hydrogen, we have a variety of vehicles by which the plasmas, now they're still plasmas. I mean, right? Let's define the difference between a plasma and a plasmoid.
Well, yeah, they are plasmoids at this stage.
At this stage, they are plasmoids.
And yeah, that's the collapse of the bubble is
right. Okay.
You're getting there. And I mean, look, the only difference, you know, obviously people understand there's these 4 states of matter, and plasma is what we usually call the fourth state. We should probably call it the first state and put it in reverse. But all as a plasmoid is structured plasma. So it's structured in this inverse toroidal hyperboloidal form. And like I said, this is the shape of any field, really. This is what a field is. So this is why Malcolm sometimes refers to them as self-contained electromagnetic fields, is because that's what a field is. It's structured plasma.
Jordan, is it right to say I call them self-employed plasma because they can like function on their own and they can go off and do a job on their own? Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like if we look at some of the
self-employed plasma.
Yeah, like the Russian or the the UFO research, there's a lot of reportings of these ball lightning entities. And these are just larger charge clusters, because a charge cluster is, another way to refer to this, where we've just got a lot of these smaller structures coming together to create a larger structure, and then they become quite independent. And there's even stories of them pulling a train along, and like there's a lot of reportings of them doing quite conscious and strange things. These little structures, I kind of compare them to working like bees. It's like when you've got a hive of bees, they all automatically kind of know what to do, and they'll work to keep that hive in homeostasis. So if it gets too warm, you'll get some of the bees flying to the front. They'll flap their wings, they'll cool it down. And the plasmoids kind of like to do that, where they don't like things to get too turbulent or too hot or too cold. They're going to keep equilibrium in the system. And yeah, so they're conscious, essentially, as our whole world is, exactly like the old alchemists used to say, is that everything is conscious, and it is. Even what we call space around us, filled with consciousness, filled with living entities. Plasmoids.
Absolutely.
That just is the thing that kind of raises what hair I have left on my legs, raises the hair up. and that they are almost seem to be operating as almost like you said bees, but I've thought of it as a hive mind of sorts, that there's some kind of a cooperative thing going on there that really is pretty amazing to me, that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. The idea that they almost assume properties of living things and sentient things, almost as if they're aware on some level of sensory perception of some kind. I mean, it's just, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what all this means. But the more I learn, the more it seems to me that if there was a system of energy, if you want to call it manipulation or energy control or energy utilization in past civilizations, this would be the obvious logical choice. I mean, it seems to me the inevitable next step.
Yeah, it's inevitable. Like this is the most fundamental principles in the universe, and there's nowhere else to go, frankly. Anywhere else we go, it's just a waste of time. This is how power, how energy, how human life, how all life in the universe works. And Bob's showed this in his SEM work in these reactors, that these little crenellated iron microspheres that we see splattered up against the wall of the thing, like this is terraforming. This is elements are being created in these structures and then spilled out, and all sorts of elements. And you can imagine these could be tiny little worlds, tiny little universes. It's like, we think of like plasmoids like bees, but ultimately, like, we're like bees too. When you look at anything on a large enough scale and you zoom out, like Malcolm has a saying, if you're inside an engine, you'll see the pistons flying, you'll see all these explosions happening. But if you're the guy outside the engine, you just see a block sitting there producing the power that you want. And ultimately, no matter all the craziness that's going on inside there, on whatever fractal scales of time that are happening, you just get an end result on the other side. And that's all our world could be, to some extent, is just a source of power for the greater universe. And we don't see it because we're too small, and we don't see the work being done in these reactors or in every microscopic, particle or point in the universe. We don't see it because it's too far away from us in this fractal harmonic system of time. But
that was just the word. The word that came into my mind the second before you said the word fractal was fractal, because It is. It's like we're
Yeah.
now seeing that the macroscopic and the microscopic are fractal.
As above, so
Synchro.
below.
Yeah, and I had a perception of that, but learning about the plasmoids has like totally brought my understanding of the harmonic and geometric structure of reality to another level completely.
Yeah.
And
Well, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I know Jahannah wants to show something there, but I just wanted to follow up with just that it is all consciousness, right? Everything is consciousness ultimately, right?
What else is
the
there?
universe and God. So we all are interconnected and part of that hive. But yeah, it's all consciousness.
Yeah.
I happen to have it on my desk, which is timely, but I have a piece of the thunderstorm, the old sphere that got sliced up because I was there on the day and Malcolm let me keep some for like historical purposes. But so for people who are listening going, well, how do you know it's ball lightning? It's because Malcolm allowed one of the spheres, the big one that had been running, I think for like 8 years or in the all the testings up until
Was
now.
that the one that had been retrofitted to the Caterpillar generator?
Possibly
Yes.
it was one of the OG ones, and he said that
I
he
think
would,
that was the one, if I remember.
yeah, and it was
That's
cut
the
up in
one.
London. I was there to like witness it happening, and I was there when Bob first came to look under the SEM and look first with his macro photography, and that's when the understanding of how the ball lightning I think came to be like the proof of it, because when you look at this piece of the thunderstorm, this is just stainless steel, but when you look at it under the microscope, you can see the yin yang shape happening, and you can see, is it 4.3 trillion impact like zones of the ball lightning?
Yeah. I think it was.
It
Uh,
was
I think it was
thousands and
even. It
billions.
was even more than that, maybe. But yeah. It was something like that. Some
Conservatively,
enormous. It's just like covered in
you can
these
see them with
artifacts.
your, from the human eye, you can see like it looks like leopard sprint spots and dots all on the inside of this stainless steel. And also it's sparkly to the light. You could just shine a torch and the whole thing looks like it's covered in like a crystal resin. And then when you look at it under the camera, that's when you can see all of the like compounds that have been made under there. But yeah, that's where this like yin yang shape comes from. I happen to have it on my desk. I was like,
And you
great, there we
can, you can see all of those photos if anyone's interested on Bob Greenyer's Substack, which I think is Substack Remote View. You'll be able to find it. And he's also just released a kind of inner circle kind of thing that you can subscribe to and check out the depths of his work there. But he's got a lot of all of those photos and all of that work that he did on the Thunderstorm Generator that you can see on his Remote View Substack there, and see those leopard spots, see these structures up close, hear his explanations of these things, and see how he relates it to all of this previous data, these other reactors that have been explored, and particularly Dr. Matsumoto's work that I'm helping to archive at the moment. He found all of these same structures, and yeah, this is essentially the telltale signs of ball lightning or plasmoids.
Yeah, definitely. Any links that you have related to that to get people straight to these things, I want to include them in the description. I know
Yeah,
a lot of people watch on mobile and it's kind of difficult to find, but I want to include these and make it easy for people to jump around and go down further into the rabbit hole as far as they want, right? So I'll definitely want to list from you too on all those links.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have a graphic here, which again, you've probably seen before, but I think it kind of shows the initial operational principle of a thunderstorm generator.
All right, catalytic resonator, seeing it?
It's a little blurry there, but so this is very similar to the functioning of a Rank-Hilch vortex tube, right? I mean, this is what Malcolm early on said, look into the vortex tubes. And in a vortex tube, you're introducing basically a gas. It could be any gas, but it's usually air at room temperature. And then what the vortex tube does is it somehow separates the air into hot and cold components. And that's essentially what is happening in the Thunderstorm Generator, I believe. If I can, let's see here. I'm going to jump to, should have a slide here of the vortex tube so people can see what that is. Might have to pull it up. I think I've actually got it on a different slideshow. So we'll save that for now, but I'll pull it up later. And so what we're seeing here, it says hot exhaust gas coming in. Now this is here, I think we should be clear. This is not coming from through the bubbler, is it? This is
No, it's
being
opposite
recycled.
direction.
This is coming directly out of the generator or the engine itself, right?
Yep. Yeah, this is just straight out of the exhaust pipe.
And it's being recycled into the spheres, into the Thunderstorm Generator. And so it comes in and then it begins to make this, well, this would be the clockwise.
Counterclockwise for the exhaust stream. Yeah.
Counterclockwise. Okay. Then it's being fed. You've got a positive charge on the outside of the outer sphere. And I believe then a negative charge on the inner sphere?
Yeah, that's right. And this all comes back to, Walter Russell's model of physics, which a lot of people may be aware of, that, when you're looking at negative charge, you're also talking about clockwise spin, contraction, cooling, all of these things. And when you're looking at counterclockwise spin, you're looking at heat, you're looking at positive charge, and these are kind of the two principles of the universe, essentially, what Malcolm calls clockwise imploding or contracting and counterclockwise exploding or expanding. And that's based on Walter Russell's work. And
here we've got two oppositely spinning vortices. And this inner one is clockwise. The outer one is counterclockwise or anti-clockwise that he's showing here. And then you've got exhaust gas outlet to muffler. So this right here is then being part of what's being recycled.
Well, yeah, this is going to your final exhaust. So there's been a few different models made. So these are maybe some older diagrams, but
right.
Yeah. So essentially it's just your exhaust streams coming down as you show here. It's coming around and it's staying in that outside pipe. So you can see these are the two nested pipes and nested spheres here. And there's a third center one generally just as a flow guide, your 2-inch sphere.
In here.
But then this hot exhaust gas is just flowing out. It's going through the other sphere and it's exiting the machine. And this is where we're measuring that it no longer has its carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, hydrocarbons. It's got significantly increased oxygen. And so of course, the cold stream's not even touching, it's coming in the other direction. But this is again, the natural form and function of a thunderstorm is what we get at the center of the thunderstorm, at the center of the hurricane, is this eye of the storm. And this is a plane of equilibrium between two opposing forces, because these are the only two forces in the universe. Like I say, all of these principles, positive, negative, hot, cold, contraction, expansion, they can all be unified. These are just like aspects of a thing that we're looking at. And so we're creating this plane of equilibrium somewhere in the pipes here. And this is what splits apart things at an atomic level. This is where we're getting the atomic reconstruction of the carbon exhaust waste, is because of these two opposing forces. And essentially, when you look at how this is working, it's just a big plasmoid. This is how the plasmoid works as well. It's just two opposing vortexes, plane of equilibrium, 0 point at the center. And then, so it's like the thunderstorm generator is just working on a larger scale of what the plasmoid is doing, is that when anything passes through the 0 point, and this is all to do with time, because everything in this world is an AC perturbation, it's alternating current. It has a frequency, essentially. And the 0 point is the only thing that doesn't. This is the only point that has no time, no frequency. And so if something passes through that point, it completely disassociates. It just becomes pure potential, ether again. And so then it's just depending on the conditions of the device of the thunderstorm, it's going to reform into particular things, and you know what was fed into it, how much energy is available. Yeah.
I've had multiple people ask me, they're not clear on what is, you tell them it comes in at the same angle as the Great Pyramid, right? So that incoming exhaust pipe that was on the left side, right? It's the placement of that pipe on the sphere that then creates that particular angle.
It's the transition between the cylinder and the sphere. And my understanding is, see if this sounds right to you, Jordan, is that what that does is it minimizes the anti-effects, or minimizes the effects of turbulence. I mean, I'm drawing on hydraulic principles of flowing water, but definitely in Schauberger's work shows that if you have transitions, you know, that the angle of the transitions can affect the amount of turbulence that's introduced into the water flow. And my understanding when Malcolm was explaining this to me was that angle, that's the collar that forms the transition between cylinder and sphere, optimally was 51.84 degrees, which I noted immediately. Well, that's the pyramid angle, but it's also an angle that's I think it's the P waves that are generated through the Earth's crust during a seismic event. I don't know what the connection there would be, but maybe.
It's also double the great year frequency, right?
Right.
But, you know, 5.84 if you take out the decimal point. And it's also, you know, the moon was what, 51,840 miles around the Earth per day. So this is where we get the music of the spheres from, and what makes these measuring systems so kind of fundamental and special, and why it's all done in imperial measurements. But that's exactly what it is, right? Water likes to flow in a certain way. Air likes to flow in a certain way, vortexes specifically. And of course, plasma likes to flow in a certain way. And so if we harness these natural principles, and mathematics is a sacred ancient language that we only understand about 20% of these days. You know, we write out longer and longer equations, but we're just using, it's like, you know, trying to use a crappy language like English to explain something that could be easily explained in, you know, a language that has the words, has, you know, a mathematical basis to it that can explains things in a far more simplistic way. And that's what this maths is. That's what these numbers that Randall's been talking about for years are. We find them all over nature. We found the ancients use them everywhere, in everything, you know, every secret society, every ancient builder, every ancient culture. I found them in the Vedas. Marco found them in the Baha'i scriptures. They're there in the Bible and the biblical measurements. They're there in the city of Jerusalem. They're there in the pyramids. You know, they're everywhere. Why
the holy city?
Templars, yeah, right.
As described in Revelations, yes.
Yeah,
I did this
that's why
thing. It was, I think, Mark at the after school. What's Mark's last name? He did a treatment of this thing that I showed and it's ultimately based on the work of William R. Fix, who wrote a couple of books, and then he had a chapter that dealt with the relationships between the size and shape of the Great Pyramid of Khufu and the Earth. I elaborated a little bit on that, but it was basically ultimately his work. I put that out there, and I showed to a very, very close approximation the pyramid Earth ratio is 43,200. If you enlarge the Khufu's pyramid by 43,200, you're within literally a few, you know, just a small portion of a mile of the actual polar radius of the Earth. And because of the fact that the pyramid essentially is the solution to the squaring of the circle problem, what happens if you enlarge it 43,200 times, the square base of the Khufu's pyramid would now be equal to the equatorial circumference of the Earth. Again, within a very, very precise range.
Yeah.
And of course, the scaling factor is 43,200. And it actually goes more than that, because it not only translates from space, but into time as well, because of how far the Earth will a point on the equator will move, say in 2 seconds, which is, if I remember right, it's, let's see, well, I could figure it out quickly, but is a subset of the distance around the pyramid's base. In other words, let's see, we could calculate it really quick, and I think I'll do it on the break, and we'll I'll pull the number up. But anyways, what I was getting at is one of these, one of these archaeologists that has a monopoly on reality. There's a bunch of them out there. They come out of the schools of academia, and they're all a clique, and they're considered themselves, an elite group, and they have the full story on 200,000 years of human history, and we can't challenge or we can't question or any of that. So
I've heard of those guys.
yeah, one of them, he put up a video that he did that was a supposed debunking. He says it was entitled something, Randall Carlson's Ridiculous Pyramid Theories. And in the crux of his argument was that I just went and searched and found some arbitrary number to make it work. That was the crux of his, that was it. Carlson went out and just arbitrarily found some number that would make his ridiculous
He just found him in
theories work.
millions
That was
of
the
places.
essence. That was the essence of it. It's like, what comes to mind is the thought, what is it? Who was it that said, there are none so blind as those who will not see? And that's what when I see these guys, that's what comes in my mind. They're just like willfully blind. They've got their constricted view of reality. It's a kind of a narcissism, I think, that they're telling themselves that, yeah, okay, well, we got it all figured out. We have it. We're sitting on top of this monopoly of knowledge, of reality. And what, frankly, in my mind, that's far more ridiculous than thinking there may have been a culture that at one time was able to measure the earth and incorporate
it's not that
very
there may have
precise
been,
measurement.
there was. There is solid evidence, thousands of reference points. It's in every ancient scripture, every
Yep.
ancient history. They are blind. And it's just pure arrogance.
Yes, arrogance, that's the word.
Yeah, nothing more to it. 432,000 years in Kali Yuga, How many thousands of years ago did the Indian culture put this down? It's pure arrogance that they've written this out of history, and
It is.
ridiculous.
Thank
All right,
you.
well, we're about an hour in. What do you want to say there, Randall?
Well, yes, ridiculous.
Supporting Jordan.
He confirmed my
ridiculosity.
opinion of some of these guys is they're the ones who are ridiculous. And anyways, yeah. So
What can you do?
what can you do? You can just move on, and they're going to get lost in the dust of history.
Yep.
All right,
The
we're going to take a
cycles don't
break
stop
here.
for anyone.
Chill out. And then, Randall, if you got those thunderstorm slides you want to get into after, we can do that on the break. Jahannah, do you want to add something there? Sorry.
No, I just remembered that Malcolm, just to like link it back to the shape of the entrance where the exhaust goes into the thunderstorm, because Malcolm showed me that for the patent man who came, he had to make one with it going the other way to prove it didn't work. That, like, it was very specific that the geometry was part of the design, and so I think Malcolm was annoyed because he was like, I had to pay to make one that I knew wasn't going to work just to prove to the patent man that it was in fact very important, the angle that exactly went in. And he showed me where it had been put on the other side. So yeah, very
all the mechanics in
critical.
Australia can confirm that too. If you vary it, it doesn't work. Or it
has
works,
to
but
be
not as well.
exactly this shape. Yeah.
All right, cool. When we come back, maybe we'll talk about how the number 111 comes into anyway to alchemical science, and let Jahannah tell us about her funny old world explorations and plenty more after the break.
Yeah, I couldn't find the slide I'm looking for.
No,
It must be on a drive somewhere. It was basically a comparison, side-by-side comparison of Thunderstorm Generator and Vajra with arrows and everything pointing. It was a really cool slide, but I guess I'm not going to get to show it to you guys today.
Not for
I can
today.
envision it. I can envision it.
But we could look at some images of the Vajra now.
All right, well,
Talk
let's get
about it.
back from
Always a good
break.
idea.
Plenty of stuff we can cover. We'll try to keep it into the next hour, but welcome back. Cosmographia episode 111 with Jordan from Alchemical Science and Jahannah James that does the Funny Old World videos on YouTube. Randall, we just got back from a tour. I got part of the Columbia River and not quite to the gorge, but from one of the spots you definitely wanted to check out there at the Nook.
Mhm.
Excellent tour with 40 plus people. Came off real smooth. 6 days. A lot of fun, and tours are going to keep coming, and we're going to do some new ones in 25 also. I don't know what you want to show or share or overview on the tour, and then we'll let Jahannah tell some of the tours and trips she's been on recently. But yeah, lots more to get to.
Let's just take about a 3-minute explanation here because you've got your backdrop there, and I'm going to pull up a slide here. Okay, let me pull up a slide, and actually I'm going to pull up Google Maps, and I'll do a share screen here.
And I got my lovely shirt that Randall says includes some alchemy, actually.
Oh, nice.
The sun and the moon and the 2 pillars or columns there of the twin sisters. Got the map. Yep.
Okay, so this is the Columbia River, and the picture, Brad, if he was, you're probably
F11.
sitting right up here on the edge, right? Because
it's just to the left of there, because there's that notch, right? Yeah.
yeah. So what's behind you, behind your right shoulder, or from our perspective on your left, is looking at this peninsula that extends out here. Now, what's interesting about this is you have 2 rivers, a large river, the Columbia, and a smaller tributary coming together. But before they come together, and their confluence point, which is about 11 miles from here down to where they meet, is that that when the flood came, see, this is important because normally, think about this. If you could take all floods and categorize them into two basic categories. One would be your typical normal river flood that's going to be the result of rainfall. And you would see, and I use the analogy of 1993 flood of the Mississippi River, where, because I can still remember, the concern as the water level is rising, and is it going to overtop the levees? And, it's now risen higher than it's ever done before. And that's typically because you've got the water being fed into the watershed from multiple sources, and then downstream, you've got this rise. It can be fast or it can be slow. Fast would mean over several days. Slow might be over several weeks. The other type of flood would be an outburst flood, which in nature, they occur primarily if you have some kind of a natural dam, which can be a glacier, or it can be, for example, if you have a landslide and it falls into the river. And one of the places we stayed along the Columbia here was exactly that. You have a landslide. In fact, you can see, like on this map here, here's evidence of a landslide right here. See that there's a slumping. And if this landslide completely crosses the river, it'll block the river temporarily. The river will rise behind it, and at some point it'll breach the dam. Same way with the glacier dam, right? Now you have what's like a giant flash flood that's not the gradual rising of a river, but you've got almost like a tidal board that's moving down current, right? So what's interesting about this, I think now my numbers should be relatively close. The top of this peninsula here and here is about 800 feet above the modern Columbia. Now, if you had a rising of the river over several days or weeks, well, then the John Day, there would be which is this river here, the tributary river, there would be a somewhat of a lag, but more or less, as this river, main trunk river out here is rising, it's going to be back flooding into the tributary valley, and it's going to be rising at roughly the same rate. And when you get to the peak of the flood, you get to its maximum depth, this is going to be reaching back upstream somewhere here. And then when the main trunk river drains, this will drain along with it. That's not what happened here. What happened here was like a giant tsunami wave coming down the valley of the Columbia here. And how we know that is because it overtopped this ridge right here. And it downcut and created all this erosion down at the bottom. You can see the effects of a landslide that temporarily blocked the John Day River. And there was actually a waterfall coming over the rim that left this, let's see here, we can go to here. You can see in the satellite view, you can see there's this streamlined form here. You can actually see the pathway where the water overspilled or overwashed, and then it cut a stream here and it cut a stream here. And so you had two different streams right here, and you can actually see them. And down here, you've got the material that was deposited at the base of this waterfall. So in other words, what I'm getting at here, to make a long story short, is that what happened here is this overtopped and then it eroded down to the bottom, right? So it had to have done this very fast. It did this before the John Day River rose. In fact, the John Day River was pretty much at the elevation it is now. Does that make sense? If the John Day River, if this flood had come on and eventually, of course, once it passed the confluence here, water backwashed, and then you would have had this complete submergence. But what this is telling us is that the rush of water came down here and it was able to overtop this and spill all the way to the bottom of the John Day before the water got here and back flooded up, because you can picture if the water in the John Day and here were roughly equal, there wouldn't have been a waterfall, would there? But that's what this is showing us. What this is showing us is that you had a wall of water that was probably 600 feet high, rushing down the Columbia, hitting this curve, overwashing the top of this, going down the river here, and then, only then, back flooding up into the John Day River. So this was a very significant piece of evidence right here, showing, being able to allow us to characterize the onset of this flood, or floods, as the case may be. And Bradley was able to procure us access. This is private property, generally no trespassing, but Brad was able to get us access to this property. So we were able to come up here and photograph and video. I think, Brad, did you fly your drone here?
I sure did.
You sure did. So we'll be
Nice.
having this drone footage of this, what's going on here. So that was one of the very significant things. And the other significant
Well,
thing,
that's a good one.
yeah, that's a good one.
Let's you want to roll on there?
Well, I was going to, without giving an explanation,
You've done not Burlingame. Is that where you're going, or are you going Tammany Bar? You've done
I was going
Tammany
to show
Bar.
this was
bunch
to
of
me
times.
my favorite, I think, of the whole trip,
All right.
because you did mention earlier the Bonneville flood, and this is where the Great Bonneville flood, coming up ultimately out of Utah, way down here where Lake Bonneville was, flowing up through the Snake River Canyon to Lewiston and Clarkston here we go. Clarkston and Lewiston. And then that flood ultimately came, this is the top end of Hell's Canyon, came up here, deepest canyon in North America, by the way, deeper than the Grand Canyon, came up here. The Bonneville floods were moving down gradient, and then over here, all the way over here, where the Palouse River meets the Columbia, this was the waters coming down this way from the Missoula flood, caused a split right here and reversed the current, the flow of the Snake River, and reversed it all the way back to Lewiston and Clarkston, and right in here. And so
when is the flood of you're talking about? What's the timeline for this? Is
well,
this
that's controversial. The dates range between 12,000 and 17,000 or so.
okay.
I don't think that there's a whole discussion that needs to be had about the dating here of all of this. But and it's what made this site so interesting and important was what I was getting at is that the backwash of the Missoula flood went all the way up here to Clarkston, backed up, continued to back up in the Snake River here and met the flood coming ultimately out of Utah, the Bonneville flood. They met right here. And if I go here to I think we can see right here, there's a big gravel pit right here. And Brad arranged for us to get in there and have a private tour. So the whole group was brought in and we toured this gravel pit and was able to see where the Bonneville flood and the Missoula flood met and intermingled. And what's significant about this is because I was saying earlier, generally the geologists that have studied the Bonneville flood, they have their dating. You've got the geologists looking at the Missoula flood, they have their dating. And generally the two floods, the Missoula was the biggest documented flood in North American geological history, which is interesting because it only happened, 13 or 14,000 years ago. The Bonneville flood, 40 million cubic feet per second. Missoula flood peaked out at hundreds of millions of cubic feet per second. But the point is, they're not connected in any way. There's no common cause. The theories as to the origin of the two floods have nothing to do with each other in effect. What this outcrop here shows is that they were happening simultaneously. And you can see Missoula floods, Bonneville floods, which are very distinct, and then topped by Missoula floods again. And so what that does is it creates a bit of a conundrum for the mainstream perspective on this. Either their simultaneity was just purely coincidental, or these two floods, one originating, according to the mainstream view, in Montana, but I'm arguing that it was up in the Canadian Rockies and north of there up by Prince George. But regardless, that flood and a flood originating out of Utah would have then had a common cause. If that is true, then the whole mainstream narrative completely unravels. And that's the significance of what we saw there, which was evidence that they were happening simultaneously, and therefore we're faced with coincidence or this gigantic flood out of Utah was caused by the same trigger as a gigantic flood coming out of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what that does to the whole? Now, the next step is timing this and linking it with all the evidence that's coming out now about the Younger Dryas, because the two seem to be very much overlapping, if not, consistent with each other.
So these are the kind of things we get into on the Mega Floods tour. Randall speaks in depth. We stop at 3 to 5, 6 sites a day, private accesses for different places. We got big, nice parks where we do lunches and, lots of places you can wade in the water or the river or swimming. We had perfect weather this time. One night we went out to see the moonrise, the harvest moon. Didn't quite work out weather-wise, but Randall did a talk that evening about some of the lunar mysteries. So that's some of the other special things that happen on these tours. Also, we went for an early morning sunrise and missed that. So yeah, it's a very unique way to spend a week of your life. As we always say, the people are just amazing and instant friends. And again, that's what we hear repeatedly. It's as awesome as it is, awesome as people love meeting Randall and hearing him talk on these in depth on these topics. It's the friends that you make. So hopefully we can entice you to come on a new one. And actually, I do have a fairly short drone video place that was on the map there where the backfloods come down the Snake River right to Lewiston. Let me see if I can get this thing to play quickly here. I can even bump up the speed of it, but you get an idea of what we get people out into.
And your typical tourist and go, where did you go on this tour? Well, let's see, we went to a bunch of gravel pits.
We saw rocks.
Yeah, we saw rocks. We saw piles
Yeah.
of gravel.
Rock
I love
nerds.
going to see rocks.
Yeah.
I can't wait to come to these gravel pits with you guys one day.
I know. Well, I think we're about to see. I guess I don't think I've seen this, but I'm really looking forward to seeing this.
No, I just went
Oh,
through some
wow.
yesterday. So we're up over the Snake River. You see our people there hanging on the side of the cliff.
Oh, pause it right there so you can get a sense of the scale. The scale of these landscapes are extraordinary. You see the people down here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
tiny.
Yeah. And they're actually full-size people. They've not been shrunken down to microscopic size.
There's
Well, we'll
nothing
vouch for
In
like
that.
case
it.
you
That's
were
true.
wondering, Jahannah.
Yeah, I mean, I was. It looks like a model with little tiny little stick people. But there's nothing like this in England. This is so alien.
And
to-
and
to
so
all
this
that.
is the Nook, right?
No, this is the Nisqually John, right? It was the Snake River
Whoa.
going back into
Oh,
Lewiston and Clarkston.
okay.
So you're saying back in the Younger Dryas, there was a flood that came down here and went over the size of this ridge?
Um,
Yeah, what was
Like-
it? 600 feet deep through here.
Wow.
Yeah,
Imagine
something.
standing on there back in the day, and then you run all the way one way, and then there's another flood coming from the other direction.
yes,
Pointless.
that's. I'm still not quite. So this is the snake. Of course, yeah, this is the snake. not-
Oh, you know what? You guys went late to Steptoe, so you guys didn't go here. This is
No,
where
that's-
this is where we went. The morning sunrise crew went and then just met you at lunch.
Oh, that's why I'm not.
Aha. Okay,
Uh,
Randall even missed out on this one.
It's stunning.
well, yeah, but I got to sleep in, so that's the main thing.
Yeah, that was the 5 a.m. departure. That was the first time we tried that. And
So
not
pause
not
for
do
a
it again.
second. Just pause for a second because you can see
right at the end here, but yeah.
you see these. You can see horizontal lines here. That's
Yeah.
where the water was during the peak. You can see over here the horizontal lines. Those are the strand lines where
Right.
the high water. I'm not sure if this is the high water mark. I think it was higher than that.
We don't see your cursor. It's on my screen.
Oh, well, but I think everybody sees the horizontality
Yeah,
in there, right? Yeah.
That's also basalt flows, but yeah, there's some marks up the mountainside. Yep.
Well,
So
Okay.
that's that little
Do you have
show off to entice people. We get out and hike and go see overlooks like that. That's always my favorite thing to do is go up and find the highest point and see the longest distances. And that's where we were behind me also.
oh, right.
So yeah, Jahannah, I want to hear about some of the stuff you're doing. I know this time's flying by, but
Oh, yeah. I just got back last week from Easter Island. Went out to, it was a 2 day, I was 2 days of flying just to get there because it's the most remote airport in the world. I had to fly all the way to Santiago, Chile, and then they have one flight a day that goes out into the Pacific and to Easter Island, and one going back. And I didn't realize, well, obviously I knew it was remote, but I didn't factor in the idea that if you miss that flight, you're stuck. But also sometimes they say that they fly all the way out. It takes 5 hours to fly out from Chile to Easter Island, and sometimes they can't land. It's a tiny little airport on a tiny little island, and if the weather's not right, the plane is just circling back around. And it happened the day before we left, not to us, but to the people who were trying to leave the island. They got stranded. So I was like, wow. But aside from that, I didn't get stranded. I got to go, and it was incredible. Tiny island, only 14 miles long, covered in Moai. Everywhere you look, there's just real Moai, replica Moai. It's stunning. I can quickly share my screen because I wanted to ask you, Randall, particularly about sediment and rock erosion, and I thought you are the dude that would know.
oh, good. Well, yeah, and I think definitely we'd like to have you back independently to talk about your channel and your research and studies and what you're up to with the funny
Okay.
old world.
Yeah.
So we'll do
So
more
this-
of this with Jahannah.
This was me
Okay.
with the Moai dudes. So yeah, this was, I called it Moai Mountain. It's the literal quarry where they were carving the Moai out of the mountain. And some of them are still in situ in the mountain. And there's one massive one that was going to be about 80 foot tall that never got put up. It's still lying there. But yeah, the sediment, the amount of sediment that these guys are stuck in, they say that it's about 20 feet of sediment, because some of these are about 28 foot tall. And some of them are buried completely. There's like completely lost Moai that's under here. But then the timeline of the Moai, they are so much younger than I thought that they were. They were made around 1200 AD to 1600 AD. So they're about 800 to 400 years old. And obviously, when I first saw them, I was like, whoa, one, why are they in so much sediment for only being 400 years? And two, why are they so eroded? Because every Moai that I could find on the island is super duper eroded.
Well, that's the first thing I would look at, which suggests to me, I mean, without knowing any of the, I mean, did they use OSL dating, or how did they date them? I mean, my first impression looking at the erosion on this would be that they're quite old. I mean,
yeah, so they carbon dated, obviously you can't carbon date the stone, but they carbon dated, like they dug around the Ahus and around some of they excavated a few of them that were in the like factory site, and they got the earliest carbon dates that they could find was kind of around 1200 AD for human activity. But then they're made from 4 different kinds of rock, but most of them are made, some are basalt, but most of them are volcanic tuff, which I think is actually super, super soft and would erode quite quickly. So maybe that accounts.
Okay, that could, yes.
That accounts for the timeline.
Okay. So like if this one here was tough, then I could then see this level of erosion after 800 years or so.
Okay, then that makes sense. Yeah, because they were, the majority of them are volcanic tuff, but 13 of them are basalt, which are apparently the earlier ones. So maybe they started with basalt and then were like, this is quite hard, then moved to the softer rock. And yeah, the sediment, like there's a lot of it. So I feel like it would have had to have happened quite quickly, because if this was still an active Moai factory around 1600 AD, and then we know that the Europeans arrived in 1722, about 120 years later, and we have sketches from the Europeans that show the Moai in kind of the exact same position with the exact same amount of sediment, give or take a little bit. So that I feel like it's maybe like a landslide or some sort of wet slide happened to bury them, because they weren't perfect.
So they didn't, okay, so that would be an option, which without knowing enough, I would think that. But then on the other hand, there's no evidence that the sediment was already there and they excavated into the sediment. And then, well, if they did that though, then the whatever material, in other words, if they dug a pit and then erected the thing in the pit, like you're showing right there, see, okay, so there would be a clear differentiation between the sediment that was pristine and the sediment that had been used to refill the pit. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In other words, there's stratification in here. I can actually see it in this slide. If you just dumped sediment back in to fill up the pit, well, there's not going to be stratification. There's going to be no structure in it. So it's going to be clearly differentiable from the surrounding sediment. So that's my first question, because if there's not this differentiation, if this sediment comes right up to I want to use the same word you used. What was it? What do you call them?
Moai.
Moai. Okay. So if this sediment comes up and then surrounds the Moai, I mean, you can look right here and you can see that it looks like it was up to this level right here. So this was above ground, this was below ground. I mean, then that would suggest that, yes, it was some kind of a mass wasting or a slumping off the uplands that buried them, and it would have had to have been relatively viscous and slow moving, because otherwise it would have, if it were, there could be a lot of energy generated in a landslide. So
That's true.
if it's crashing down, it's going to topple these things over if they're just standing on the land surface, right? So what this suggests is that there was some kind of a more slow moving, which in geological terms you'd refer to as like a slumping rather than a landslide, where you almost have perhaps a heavy rainfall for days or maybe even a week or two, and the ground loses its cohesiveness and just moves downhill with low energy moving, because otherwise, again, these things are going to get toppled. So this is a mystery, and I don't know. I'm sure that some of the excavation of this is going to have, in some of the papers or reports, they would comment if the pit had been refilled after the placement of the Moai. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. So they were placed to stand them upright on the mountain. They would dig down a couple of feet to sort of like lock them in place while they finish, because the backs are really intricately carved, which you can't see anymore because the sediment covers up to their neck, and anyone that was outside of the exposed to the air, you can't see any of the carvings anymore. They're totally eroded. But I've lost what I was talking about. but yeah, that's kind of what they're saying, is that they can account for a few feet of the sediment. That's what I mean. Because they were put into these little pits, but the rest of the sediment appears to be like it wasn't on purpose. They're not packed in on purpose by humans.
So the burying of then the inference would be that it was natural and not
natural. Yeah, because I asked the tour guys, I said, "Oh, were they covered? Was it like a Göbekli Tepe?" And they was like, "No. It's." But I was like, initially, I couldn't account for how quickly and how much sediment there was in such short time, and then it got even shorter when I realized that they were buried up to their necks by 1722. So it had to have happened between 1600 and 1722.
Oh, okay. So what's the youngest dated Moai? Is there
1200 AD?
Okay, so 1200 AD, we can assume this sediment was not there.
Yeah,
it is now.
Yeah, so at the very bottom of the pit.
And what you were saying is that in the construction process, where they were tilted up, there was a hole. That would make sense. I mean, I think this is how standard building, engineers and builders have used that technique, where you would create a hole and then you would stand it up. It could be an obelisk. It could be any vertical structural element, raise it up. And then we're presuming that what happened then is there was some kind of a natural event, and it had to have been a pluvial event, I'm thinking, meaning a lot of rainfall that softened the ground and allowed it to slide down, but it had to have slid. Well, of course, you can see this guy looks like he's a little bit tilted over, which would make sense. Yeah, he's got a definite tilt there. What is that, about 10, 12 degrees out of?
Yeah, he's on the wonk.
He's on the wonk, yeah.
He's walking.
But
now, is this one of the native islanders here? This person?
This is the spirit of the Rapa Nui.
Rapa Nui.
Oh, okay.
But there's just moais popping out everywhere over the whole island. It's so impressive. And then they're the ones. And then there's also this weird, like, megalithic sphere rock that is got some crazy magnetic properties that apparently was brought to the island. It's not indigenous to Easter Island, and these other stones around it mark out north, south, east, west exactly. There's some very crazy anomalies with magnetic fields happening with the rock and the island. It's quite cool. All of our phone and camera equipment, the battery died within minutes when you're in front of the Moai statues.
Really?
everybody started to notice that their full batteries were just draining, cameras were just dying out on people. It was annoying, but really interesting. And we were like, okay, there's some sort of juju happening with the Moai.
That's pretty awesome. Would you want to just kind of overview some of your other travels and what you do on your channel for
Okay,
people that
yeah.
aren't familiar with you?
But wait, go back. Before
Yeah,
that.
we can get in depth in this in another
I want-
episode.
what is
Yeah, this
this?
is great. I'd love to see it.
The stone, there's some kind of a carving on it.
Yeah, so this is the Ahu, which is the kind of platform that the Moais are on top
The
of.
Ahu, okay.
The Ahu, and they found bodies inside. So kind of like a tomb, kind of like a religious temple platform. But what's interesting is at the back of this one seemed to be recycled with and had some sort of like monkey man thing on it. And then I don't think my picture shows it, but no.
The
there
vortex and anti-vortex there as well. On
Where?
back of one of the statues, if you go.
Oh,
the far
yeah,
left,
yeah, on the
yeah.
left, and there was
Yeah.
one on the center up on
On
the
the
other one
butt-
as well.
on the butt, yeah.
They're everywhere.
Kind of looks like an ankh too.
Huh.
But so originally these carvings, it's very much like very much like Göbekli Tepe style, like carvings all over the back of these moais. But just outside the view of this picture on this wall, there was a head of a moai that was used at the very bottom, so it was recycled. And I thought that was really interesting because the moai are supposed to represent, they're super sacred and they're supposed to represent ancestors. And therefore channeling mana, which is like energy. Again, weird that they use the same word as in mana,
Yeah.
like Ark of the
Yeah.
Covenant. And okay, what's that doing? But interesting that they would recycle heads of the Moai. And I was like, but I thought they were like super special. And so why would you then recycle one and whack it at the bottom of a wall? But so there's some weird little things that pop up around the island. But this is what I do on my channel. I go out to these places, scramble around, document what I can, and then try and work it out afterwards and look for any holes and mysteries and shapes and yeah. But Easter Island was phenomenal.
Yeah, so the question that always comes to my mind is, the motive. What incentivized these people all over the ancient world to do these things? It's interesting that you say 1200 that they were doing this, because that fits right like a glove into China with some of the final temple building phase in Cambodia, Angkor Wat's the final
right.
classic period of the Maya, the peak of the Gothic building in France and England, Germany
That's
and
true.
Europe, 1200. Yeah. And then you look at the other things that were going on right within that milieu from 1175 to 1225 was the release of all of the 25 Grail romances that I think dealt directly with a lot of this, that the Grail, in my opinion, is a symbol for technology, right? We can get into that sometime later if you want.
Nice.
But so the Grail romances, as they're called, the first schools of Kabbalah, the Tarot deck came out in that 50-year period. What else? The Cathar movement, the Templars, the formation of the lodges of guild builders that were involved in the Gothic cathedral building. What else? The troubadours. I mean, it was such a period of creative ferment within that half century that flanked like 1200, that I find that auspicious in a way that this is going on in this remote part of the world around that same time.
So what were you calling that on the tour, Randall? All that stuff happening simultaneously?
Did I have a word or a name?
Yeah. You blurted it out a bunch of times. Was it something Wyatt said?
Oh, synchro for synchronicity. Yeah. So yeah,
that's the Pueblo too, right?
Yeah,
Did you mention
final
that?
phase of the monumental earthwork building in eastern North America, the final phase of the Pueblo architecture of the southwestern deserts. I mean, all of this is like packaged into that, say, 50 to 75-year window.
Synchro.
And so I just that's curious to me. It's almost
It
like
Yeah.
there was
seem-
a time, almost like a conscious effort to, it was a
Enlightenment.
disclosure. It's almost like a gigantic global disclosure, I think, at this.
They're working out the same principles that we're working on now.
Yes.
They knew how to
Yes.
harness radiant energy, you know, it's as simple as this. Even basalt, you know, this is,
Yeah.
yeah, this harvests radiant energy. Done, you know, it's like how they utilized it and for what purpose, I guess, is the question. But it's like we were saying about the Thunderstorm Generator. We know that they were doing this with all of these structures.
Well,
It's there, you
yeah.
know,
And
this chi, the prana, the mana,
yes, yes. And
all
yes,
the
again,
same things, the orgone, you know, whatever you want to call it.
the odic force.
Yeah, yeah.
And it
Well,
was probably 1212, and most of them didn't even know the year, but it was probably 1212, right? Multiples for 144.
the way
to
that
crank it up.
the mana, the Rapa Nui people talk about mana, it's as if it was like a physical force that could do things. So that when they said how did the Moai make it from the mountain to the Ahus, and some of them were 60 feet, like they're well, they were going to be 60 feet. And they said, oh, well, they moved themselves with mana. And we're like, what? And they go, the Moai walked themselves with mana to their position. And they found nearly 1,000 of them, which is just insane. And there's also, I haven't got it on my slide, but there's this whole megalithic wall that appears on the island. There's nothing else like it. It's like it looks like the stuff that comes out pre-Inca in Cusco. And it's, there's loads and loads of mysteries around Easter Island. We could go down a deep dive of it, but
Well, let's do it. So your channel is Funny Old World, like OL, but again, I'll
like
put those links.
OLD, yeah, E, like ye old.
Old with an E. There we go. Thank you.
Funny old world, yeah.
That's old.
And then Jordan, your channel is Alchemical Science or Alchemical Scientist on YouTube, and talk a
Yeah,
little
it's
bit about what you've got there that's growing
Alchemical
rapidly.
It's alchemical science. But yeah, no, I've been publishing a lot of stuff about the Thunderstorm Generator. I've covered a lot of the stuff on the numbers that Randall has spoken about as well. There's some vortex-based math stuff and on Marco Rodin's work. There's some stuff on Bob Greenyer's work, but it's all around these same principles and what you guys are looking at as well, which is obviously where this whole connection between the ancient and ultra advanced modern world has spawned, because as we all know by this point, they were working on these principles. These stone structures didn't just like spring out of nowhere. They had a purpose and they were built with this technology. And this technology could manifest in various different forms. It could have been direct mental powers, frankly, you know, like because we are made of plasma, you know, we are these structures. We have influence over the world in non-physical ways, but it could also have been through all these various technologies that we're talking about now. Why don't we see remnants of them? Because they were far more advanced than us. They could do this stuff with stone. They could do it with simple metal structures. They could potentially do it with their minds, you know, as we've got some evidence in other cultures, or they could do it with musical instruments, like we saw in, you know, the evidence from Tibet on, you know, moving things with sound. And that's what this mainly is, right? Geometry, frequency. So those are all the things that I talk about. But you're going to see a lot about the Thunderstorm Generator, because I believe that this is the transition that the world needs to take back to understanding these technologies and moving forward with them. But yeah, that's me.
I really recommend Jordan's video if you want to, like an entry video on his channel, is the chessboard, and about all the ancient numbers encoded in a modern day like chessboard. And I was like, wow. Because I played chess all my life and I had no idea that I was.
And look, that's just kind of like me making it up, and because it just fits so bloody well into the chessboard, I kind of think, you know, and even the movement of the pieces and everything, you know, it's the perfect fourth, the perfect fifth. It's a musical theory, you know, and it just works on all these numbers that we've all been talking about.
Well, you know, Jordan, the floor of every Masonic temple is a chessboard.
Yeah, I pointed that out in that video, and
Wow.
yeah, and I think that is exactly why, to be honest. Is, you know, it's this, yeah, it's doubling and tripling. Doubling and tripling is the foundation of reality. That's was what Pythagoras was working on, and how our whole musical system is formed, and how our whole universe is formed through doubling and tripling.
Yeah,
And we'll
that's the
find all
whole
of these
the
numbers.
whole lambda image is based upon one leg is
Exactly.
doubling and the other is tripling, and then through the interaction of those numbers, the leg of doubles and the leg of triples, you get all of the sacred numbers, or I like to call them cosmological numbers.
Yeah.
And
the entire musical scale,
yeah,
based on A432, and then it becomes microtonal. You can expand this chart again, and
yeah.
I can quickly share this chart if you guys want,
Hell yeah.
so that we can see it here.
Well, the whole Vedic system of the ages is just like a giant octave.
Yeah, exactly. And that's all in here, like this is just
Yeah.
showing the 6 days of creation, just one simple example. But, if we look here, we've got 864, 864,000 diameter of the sun, 432, A432 scale, 432, the ratio, and the example of the pyramid you gave earlier. We've got 216, 2,160 miles diameter of the moon, and also the approximate movement of the moon per hour in a day. We've got the great year, 2592 there. We've got our 5184, 51.84 in the pyramid. And every single one of these is a note. We can see C, G, D, A, E, B, F sharp, G. The whole thing is the musical scale, and exactly how Pythagoras divides it, I believe. And we can just flick through these slides, right? And here we go. We've got like all of the old measuring systems, like from all these different cultures. We've got the 9 inches, and this is all based on 9, and all these numbers can be reduced to 3, 6, and 9 if you use theosophic addition or subtraction, which is just adding all the components of a number together, So if we do just as a simple one, 1 plus 8, oh, well, that equals 9. Or if we go, let's find 2 plus 8 plus, well,
8.
actually, that's a kind of a
8.
hard one that'll take ages to add up. But, essentially you can go, so 2 is 1 plus 2, that equals 3. And then we've got 8 is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8. You can add that up, it equals whatever. And then you can do the same with the other 8, and then add all these up, and they'll all equal 9 again. Every single number from the third column will equal 9. And then we will have 3, 6, 3, 6, 3, 6 alternating in this column, and then 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, which is the doubling sequence. And of course, you'll see all of our modern technology. We've got our screen resolution, our hard drive sizes here, 128, 256, 512. It's just unbelievable. All the apothecary weights, and they kept the apothecary's weights and other measurements, volume and everything else. They kept this for ages, right? Because I think it was important to the medicine to actually do things in these amounts. You've got, all the planetary diameters and all the other things that Randall talks about here. And of course, 396 again, 3,960 miles, the Earth's radius. It's just, it's unbelievable. These are approximations of the other planets that I just made. Like Sirius, negative 1.44 is the magnitude. It's like all these.
And it's very, very close to being 8.64 light years from the sun.
Yeah, right. And the sun and moon's average distance from Earth is 108 times their respective diameters in miles. Like, how can you make this shit up?
You can't.
The music scale, the octaves, and of course, this is just octaves. You go down the column, and this is octaves. You go across, these are perfect fifths if you go in a diagonal. And this is where all of this comes from. It's unalterable. It is the music of the spheres.
So could you put is there like a program, like an AI program or something that you could put the numbers in, and then it would make music for you, like literally would make you a little track?
Yeah. So I've actually got a video called, I think, like Decrypting Pythagorean Tuning or something, where I didn't use AI, but I just put all of these frequencies into a synth, and then just compared them to, the current 440 and 432 based like equal temperament tuning, because this is not really this is not how people explain Pythagoras's work, but this is it. This is simpler. This is what he was talking about. And yeah, you can put this into a synth and you can play a song and it sounds just like a normal song. Some notes sound like slightly more discordant than the equal temperament versions that have been developed these days, but that's because horrible notes are supposed to sound a little more horrible and sweet notes are supposed to sound a little more sweet. We just like to, make everything boring and plain, you know. So yeah, it absolutely works as a true tuning mechanism. You can just use doubling and tripling because if anyone's confused, 1, 3, 9, 27, we're just tripling, doubling, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. And then all of this is just the products of these numbers. So 2 times 3 is 6, 4 times 3 is 12, etc. And it's that simple. If you need to ever recreate all of science, then you just start with 1 and you double and triple and you get their products. And what's beautiful is these are just the 12 notes of the Western scale, but if you keep expanding this, so you can either expand it upwards with halving. Oh, actually, I've done that. There you go. You can either expand this upwards with halving and you'll get the rest of the scale, or you can expand it further out to the horizontal and you'll actually get microtonal notes that fill in and create a larger musical scale. It's just unbelievable.
Yes.
So
I'll
this is a project that the music core at school and the mathematicians can get together and like they could literally work together and make the most amazing musical of numbers.
Yeah, look, I think that music theory is actually a model of physics. It's easier to just pick up an instrument and kind of play intuitively and not learn this. But if you're learning physics, I think this is, yeah, music theory is the best thing you could ever learn because it's all resonance, it's all frequency. And it corresponds with every other system of measurement that we had in the ancient world.
Well, very interesting. We could have a whole nother 2 hours of discussion around all of this.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah, you've got that's your Pythagorean lambda.
Yeah,
What you got right there, and
that's your lambda sequence.
so this goes back to Pythagoras. We
Yep.
don't know if he was the
Further back.
originator of this or he was just picking up on something that was already a tradition, and that's kind of where I'm inclined to think.
Yeah, look, he studied in India, and when we look
Yeah.
at the yugas, just
Yeah.
as one example, and you can actually decrypt the ratios between the armies on the Battle of Kurukshetra and other things like this, and you'll find again 369, all of these numbers. And so they've been around for thousands of years, and I wouldn't even claim that those are the first records. Like it appears that mathematics and the first 9 numbers and this language of numbers is as old as our universe itself, or whoever devised it was godlike in their reasoning because it's perfect,
Yeah.
Numbers are real and alive. It describes our universe perfectly.
Well, one of the things I've kind of run into is very, it's sort of the same process. When I show these numbers, there'll always be somebody who looks up on Wikipedia and comes back and says, well, the diameter of the sun is 865,000 miles. Well, I point out, well, okay, then you're including the chromosphere in that. Where do we actually measure the diameter of the sun? But the point I make is this, as a builder, I think I have a useful metaphor here. And it's this, if I'm going to sit down, I do a lot of the design work myself. I work with other architects who draw plans and so forth. And in those plans, the blueprints, we'll call them the blueprints, even though they're not blue anymore. They're, because it used to be all blue lines. That's why they're called blueprints. Anyways, you get a set of blueprints and everything's specified. They're using units of measure, which, in Europe, it's going to be the metric system. You're going to be centimeters, meters, etc. In America, we're still using the imperial system, which I much prefer. Inches, feet, because yeah, right, exactly. There's your inch right there,
Yeah, that's right.
Well, yeah, so immediately tied the foot, it immediately connects the units of measurement that you're using with the human body and the human scale, right? So here's the thing. If you go and you get a set of blueprints and you send a team out and they build this building, let's just say a house. It doesn't matter what the building is, but say a house. Okay, so now if you go out there with precision measuring instruments, let's say some of the instruments now that you wouldn't use as a say a carpenter builder, because typically, on your measuring tape you've got 16th of an inch, and they figure, well, for any purposes that you're going to be using this, 16th of an inch is plenty precise. Well, depending on the level of craftsmanship, I can walk onto a project, I can look at the framing, let's say, of it, the carpentry work, and I can go, yeah, those guys were really good because this is really precise. Your joinery is tight. You look at others, and there's little gaps, things don't quite, the level of craftsmanship is lower. But here's the point. You've got the blueprints, which have the idealized dimensions on there. Then you have the actual physical manifestation of what's on the blueprint. And they're in that translation from idealized blueprint to actual tangible manifestation in space and time. You're going to have discrepancies that sneak in there, right? Both at the initial outset of the creation moment of this system or thing, and also over time, because I can go in and I can look at an old building, for example, if it's let's say 40 feet 3/4 of an inch or 40 feet 2 inches, my assumption is going to be, okay, the original architect was specifying this as at 40 feet, not 40 feet 2 inches, right?
Yeah.
Why add the extra 2 inches? Because now we work in an increment of we use 4-foot increments, like a piece of sheetrock, a piece of plywood is 4 by 8, the double square. But knowing this is my answer to the quibblers who are going to say, well, this isn't exact, you're having to fudge the numbers. And I'm saying, well, first of all, take a look at how much we're fudging the numbers. It's minuscule in order to make it harmonize with the
with thousands of reference points, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Let me
Yeah, 1,000 miles out of 864, 432,000. Yeah, it's pretty quarter of a
but see,
percent, right, or less, right? It's such a small
it's
variance.
a small fraction of the the deviance between the ideal and the actual. And that's how I look at it. There's this, it's like everything we see in creation is taken from this idealized template, if you will, which are all the perfect harmonic numbers, the harmonious frequencies that work with each other. Perhaps we should be looking at where things have gotten out of sync. Maybe there's consequences to that actually affect, life, the health of life of people and consciousness and so on, because clearly there's something wrong. Something has gone amiss in the world. And what is it? Well, somehow we've gotten out of balance. We've gotten out of harmony, and all of this tremendous effort that our ancestors went to through all of these strenuous, incarnations of these principles had to have meant that it was something extremely important, extremely valuable. It wasn't just they were a bunch of pre-scientific, illiterate savages, out of religious, belief in supernatural. No, I look at this and I go, no, there's a science here. There's a system. There's a technology here, right?
Yeah.
What is this? What are they achieving? And you cannot just dismiss it, because one, okay, let's say there's some idiosyncratic culture that whatever is insanity is moved to, hey, let's build something, and we'll build it out of 10 to 50 ton blocks of stone. And sometimes we may have to carry those blocks 50, 100, 200 miles. Who in their right mind is going to do that unless they have a good reason? Now, the assumption of the arrogance of modern archaeology and prehistory, people who study prehistory, is that, well, yeah, they were pre-scientific illiterates, so this is all just, their imagination. But it doesn't add up. Again, one idiosyncratic culture, yeah, maybe they're going to do that. But you're all over the ancient world, on all continents that we know, maybe even Antarctica, we don't know, but everywhere else, we see this megalithic science at work. I just started reading a paper, which I'm going to have to reread 3 or 4 times to digest it. But essentially, this study shows, and this goes back to the work of Paul Devendorf. I don't think they're even referencing Paul Devendorf. Devendorf, was that his name?
Devereaux.
Devereaux, thank you. Paul Devereaux, who showed that there was this correlation between the placement of, particularly in Northern Europe and England, between the placement of the megalithic stones and the underlying geological structure, particularly clustered around fault lines. Now, what is a fault line? Well, do you know the difference, Jahannah, between, like, say, a simple fracture and a fault line?
Well, I know the fault lines is where all the activity is, and it's where it's like the weak spot.
Basically, you're right. The difference is simple. A fracture is static, two masses of rock sitting next to each other. But a fault line is dynamic. They're moving, right? And also, not only with fractures, but certainly with fault lines, what that does is provide conduits for the movement of underground water through the crust. And the other interesting point is that just as there are lunar tides that are easily observable on the surface waters, their lunar tides are also manifesting in the subsurface waters, in the subterranean waters. And I think just as there was a sophisticated astronomical knowledge at work, because we know that from the orientation of these structures, I think there was also an equivalent sophistication of geological knowledge. And so again, it comes back, Jordan, to the as above, so below.
Mm-hmm.
That the pattern of fault lines in some interesting ways actually does sort of mirror the heavens at certain times of the year. Now, I think they were drawing on us, all this. They had a very sophisticated knowledge of the workings of natural law, and it was ultimately about uniting heaven and earth in a certain way. And the result of that would be that it would change maybe it's geomagnetism, I don't know, or something much more subtle. Clearly, there's an overlap between what science recognizes as geomagnetism and what other alternative or sciences would call the orgone or the chi, or maybe even the plasma. And so I think that's the direction that we're kind of going to move in, is trying to use these principles now to reverse engineer what they were doing in 1200 AD, what they were doing in 4000 BC, et cetera. And I think we're going to learn a whole lot that we're going to be able to apply to, like, the recovery of this technology, and maybe the restoration of some level of harmony that's been, in John Michel's interpretation, something broke that harmony, the breaking of the world, something happened. And we're in a position now where we can, and it's probably connected with something physical, like the great floods, the Younger Dryas events, the mass extinctions, the extreme oscillations of the climate.
Yeah,
I think it's all interrelated, and we have to kind of figure out how these great earth changes and so forth related to perhaps why these cultures got lost, because they did become lost. That's the history of civilization on this planet. And I think what I'm looking at now is a possible precursor to all this is the time that I'm looking at is the Eemian, which lasted from about 116 to 130,000 years ago, 129,000, because it was the closest analog to the modern Holocene, which I think the Holocene is a set of environmental conditions, climatic conditions, and so on that help the rise of civilization. Whereas if you go back 20,000 years ago to the late glacial maximum, and you're looking at 180 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, is that even enough for viable agriculture? I don't know. Maybe it took 280, 300 parts per million in order to be able to actually start growing food crops. I don't know. But one of the things I see as a potential downside to this technology, which I'm sure is easily solvable, but it's still something that has to be recognized. If the sun goes into a quiet phase, if it becomes inactive, like it did during the Little Ice Age, which was the coldest 3 or 4 centuries in the entire Holocene, give it about a century lag time, 100 to 150 years, and the oceans cool down. And as the oceans cool down, they start sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. That's probably why it went so low during the late glacial maximum, because the planet was so damn cold, the oceans got really cold, and they just sucked the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere it got down to 180 parts per million. If it had gone down another 30 parts per million, goodbye biosphere. That's it. The end of photosynthesis on planet Earth. I mean, we came like this close. So my estimation is when you look at the whole broad picture of life on Earth, for most of the time, the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has been 1,000, 1,200 parts per million and up. And those times have been some of the most prolific times for life in the whole Phanerozoic, the whole 560 million years or whatever. So my thought is, okay, that's something to keep in mind, is that if we have a natural cooling, which could happen, which happened before, it'll happen again. If we have a natural cooling, the oceans are going to start sucking carbon dioxide. And right now, we're putting a little bit more in. We're getting those carbon dioxide up to the level right now for the late Holocene. That's the lowest carbon dioxide levels, in the last literally 500 to 600 million years, the Holocene and the late glacial maximum. So I see no problem with ramping it up to 500 or 600 million. I think we need to actually, and the plant life of this planet is loving it, that we're releasing some of the carbon dioxide that's been locked up in the crust for hundreds of millions of years.
Yeah, and will regenerate itself, mind you, because people don't seem to understand that these carbon sources we're using, they will regenerate. This is just these chambers are going to fill with gases. We're going to get more oil. So there's
we're going to drastically reduce our dependence on fossil fuels with this technology.
That too.
But at the same time,
we don't need to stop, as you say.
We don't.
Really, it's about kind of breaking the narrative, cleaning up cities because they are a blight on so many people's lives. But otherwise, yeah, we need more carbon dioxide.
The carbon dioxide narrative, in my mind, is a big distraction from looking at the real things, that the sulfur dioxide, the particulate matter, all of these kinds of things that are causing, the pollution of cities and all of that. But then again, here we got potential cure for that now.
Yeah, that's it. And then now we can't use that as some kind of mad excuse. It's just that's the main thing. But yeah, we are carbon. We need carbon. It's not a bad thing for the most part. And certainly in the soil, like this is the main problem with our soils. I've got stripped down farmland at home that's been conventionally farmed for years. And what's the solution for most of it? It's carbon in that soil.
Yeah. I just a couple of months ago went and toured it's called White Oak Pastures in South Georgia, and it's one of the leading lights in regenerative farming. And it was very interesting because you could see he's been doing it there. He was fourth generation farmer. He had been brought up. His grandfather and great grandfather were pretty much traditional methods of farming. His father went into the industrial system. And so he came up in the industrial system, but began to have serious misgivings about the whole factory farming and the whole thing. So he began to experiment and learned, what's the guy's name? I don't remember, but he was sort of one of the founders of this whole system of regenerative farming. And so it's taken him about 25 years. But now he's got the system is self-regenerating. It was a very interesting weekend. We're going to be putting out, in fact, Mike Robertson just called me while we were talking, and we're about to put out a documentary about our visit to this farm. But I'll conclude it just by saying that you go out to the highway and you're driving and you look over at the fields, and Will Harris, the farmer, he called our attention to this. He says, let's see if you can tell where the boundary is between what we're doing and the standard ways of doing it. Because what they'll do is he'll have 1,000 head of cattle and he moves them every day. He has like 35 pastures and he moves them, right? And so everything is regenerating, right? Because so now we're driving down and we look, it's lush green, and then there's a fence, and then it's brown and barren on the other side of the fence. I mean, it's so stark. Yeah, okay. I mean,
we have the answers, and they can be made more efficient, but they're already there, and that's it. Rotational grazing. I know many people who've done this as well, and it just works. We've got so many ways, even biodynamics. It's like it does need to be applied properly. You do have to do it properly, but Steiner was onto it many, many years ago. It's, you know, and he was
Yes.
just using vortexes. Once again, just energizing the soil in certain ways. But all of these methods work. Biochar works. They all work. It's just all the agronomists work for chemical supplies.
That's it. Well, it's the same
It's a
problem across the board. They're working for the chemical supply, you know, the health industry is now working for big pharmaceutical.
Yep.
I mean, across the board, our foreign policy is being driven by, you know, the military industrial complex, right across the board.
Yeah.
And what's the solution? That's a topic for another conversation, but I think
Well,
there
that's
are
what I want to
solutions.
say. There are solutions, right? Yeah. So we got
Okay.
many
Yeah,
options
yeah.
of on where to go with the follow-up Cosmographia coming up, you know, the Devereaux and
Mhm.
Wilhelm Reich. Yeah, many things you just touched on there at the end. But I did want to give you a chance to, you know, make sure we review and wrap up anything that's the latest on the plasma tech that you want to share that people can know just exactly where things stand. Anything that wasn't covered, want to get that in as we wrap up here.
Look, main thing is it's you're going to see it on the market at some point pretty reasonably soon, all things considered. Yeah, there's major contracts on the table. You know, I always keep to the educational aspects, and I'm not involved at all on the commercial side, but I've been a fly on the wall for some of this stuff, and yeah, it's going to be all over the world soon, and so I don't really care what people say about it anymore because I'm just
Yeah.
seeing it all happen, to be honest.
Well, that's a
And yeah,
great
I'm going to be
summation.
there
Yeah.
to try and just teach these principles the whole way. I want to drive forward with education, and Malcolm's all about that too, which is
Yeah.
why we get on so well and why I support him in every way I can. Um, you know, I call myself his apprentice these days because he's taught me more than anyone in the world. And he really is about education and getting this out to the world, and what
Yeah.
he's done, what you've done, Randall, to assist this, what you've done as well, Jahannah. Like this has been integral because it's just been about getting it out to as many people as
Yeah.
possible. Because it doesn't matter, they could kill us, they could kill the invention, whatever. These ideas will not go away. And they are important. This is what Tesla knew. Two
Uh,
vortexes, frequency, resonance, geometry.
Also to mention that the Thunderstorm Generator it's just the first of
Mhm.
what, like 19 patents or something that Malcolm's working on, and he put this one forward first, he said, because it was the one that was like retrofitting technology that pretty much everybody has a car.
Yeah.
And it's like this one is a retrofitted piece of technology, but the idea with the other patents is that it's going to be like independent plasmoid technology. It's not something that's cleaning up old tech. It's in and of itself. And the potential for the other things, it gets into the really fun, like sci-fi world of cars that run on the atmosphere, and yeah, it gets into like the turbineless engines, like vortex things, crafts that can just take off from standing still, and it gets
Whole new
super
world.
exciting. Yeah,
This
I've
is
seen.
all the
Absolutely.
same
Absolutely.
principles. Yeah.
Right.
And also, there's the website. Just going to mention is it strikefoundation.org?
.earth.
Dot
Yeah.
Earth.
Dot
Yeah.
Well,
Earth.
actually, I think
Okay.
maybe there is a .org these days, but yeah, Strike Foundation.
Strikefoundation.earth, and it's got
Yeah.
all of Malcolm's notes. So anybody that's is welcome to take a peek, and there's a really good chart on there that links everything that we were trying to communicate about time and all the numbers and how it's all together. There's lots of visuals. There's the build it yourself open source stuff. It's all on the website.
Yeah,
That's really
read the notes. That's good stuff. Time is the mold in that matter is formed, and nature never draws in straight lines. She always draws in curves. Every curve is part of a spiral.
Yeah.
And every spiral is either clockwise imploding or counterclockwise exploding. That's all we need to know.
Now, those are all compiled in a book now. It seems like I saw him holding a
Oh yeah, it's
thick
actually
book.
on Amazon. My wife Emma formatted and put that together, and
Amazing.
you
Okay.
can order it
nice.
for cost printing price on Amazon if you look up Malcolm Bendel's notes. We probably should do a proper advertisement about that because I don't think we have yet. But yeah, definitely go and check that out.
All right, beautiful.
And The Shaman, his book, is also being republished by the wonderful Roland Hurry, and you'll be able to. Can you find that on Amazon already, Emma? You can already find it on Amazon republished because quite a few people have been asking me where that is, and Roland's going to be coming out with some new stuff as well, like
I
on
understand
elephant
he's writing a
and
follow-up.
yeah, follow up on that, and also on some previous history of these type of things. Same kind of stuff. So keep an eye out for Roland Perry's books and go read The Shaman. Tells you about Malcolm's life.
I think there's going to be a
Good
female
one.
protagonist in the new book that's based on Jahannah.
Oh yeah, that was
Yeah,
I gave Malcolm loads of notes.
All right. Well, it's never fun or easy to end one of these conversations. You know, you guys are 7 and 8 hours away on different time zones. So thank you for pulling this together, and great conversation, y'all.
Thanks. This will be fun. Until the next time.
Yeah. Please hang out for a minute.
Any wrapping thoughts here? Go see everything, Randall Carlson at randallcarlson.com, right? Check the links in the description. We're going to wrap up. You want to say anything about 111? Is there a summary alchemically that has any pertinence?
Hydrogen
for an end note.
One proton, one electron, one neutron.
One neutron.
We
Yeah.
want to talk,
That's
how
what I
often
wanted
does
right
the
there.
sun flip, Randall?
Well, it's
11
11
years.
11.1 years, is it? I think.
Yeah, I think it's 11.1 or 11.11. So
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of things about that 111.
Aha moments. Yes, that's what I wanted. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Enjoyed it. We'll have you back. Good night. Randall, you done? All right. Yep. Stick with us here, though. That's just the end of the show.